Hi, my name is Veronica Brown. I run the Next Gen Sequencing Lab at the University of Tennessee, and I recently took over the Teachers Workshop at NASBR. Before I get into the paper that I chose to discuss today, I wanted to give you a little background on the Teachers Workshop. Historically, with the Teachers Workshop, we have brought in teachers from local schools on Saturday of our local meeting, and we bring in researchers from the meeting to talk about their own research and to talk about bats in general, to educate the teachers on things they can take into their own classroom to teach their students about bats and conservation in general. But we found it's been getting harder and harder to get teachers to come in on a Saturday, but to also see how they can incorporate that material into their already stretched course loads. So we've been thinking, even pre-COVID, of ways that we could incorporate online learning into the Teachers Workshop through presenting teachers with online materials, but also through media such as Skype a Scientist. Last year, we also incorporated a pre-meeting workshop for meeting participants, such as new grad students or other researchers who haven't had much experience with outreach. We brought in people familiar with doing outreach and taught the students how to incorporate outreach into their own research. And it was pretty well received, and I hope to be able to do this kind of workshop more in the future. So now that you know a little bit about the teacher workshop, I'll tell you about the paper that I chose. I chose a paper called Sympatric Bat Species Prey Opportunistically on a Major Moth Pest of Pecans in the journal Sustainability. This paper is by Elizabeth Braun de Torres, myself, Dr. Gary McCracken, and Dr. Thomas Kuntz, who we unfortunately lost this year due to COVID. A little bit of background on this paper. This paper comes from my master's work and Liz's PhD work. It was a long time coming, took a while to get published as a combination of both our projects. This paper comes from research done in organic pecan orchards where there were several growers who put up bat houses and saw a great reduction in the amount of pests that they had on their orchards. And it was obvious to the growers that the bat houses and the presence of the bats was really reducing the amount of pests that were preying upon their pecans. So they wanted us to show that the bats were eating these pests. And we chose to do that through DNA. We extracted the DNA from the feces of the bats and used a molecular technique called qPCR to identify certain insect pests in the diet of the bats. If we were to do this project now, we would use next-gen sequencing, which is a more modern technique and looks at many insects at once in the diets of the bat. But at the time, we were using qPCR. It identifies one insect at a time, and in theory can do it quantitatively. We were particularly interested based on talking to the growers on pecan nut case bearers and hickory shuckworms. For my master's work, I collected samples non-invasively. We set out traps underneath the bat houses and collected feces passively. And mostly we focused on Tiderata brasiliensis, the Mexican freetail bats that filled up the bat houses. Mexican freetail bats are studied a lot because they live in humongous colonies, they're easy to catch, and there's a lot of them. But I unfortunately didn't find a lot of these insects that the growers were interested in the diets of the bats. So one of the things about myself is that I'm a lab person. Liz is a field person. But one of the things we did as part of our projects is we switched places. I went into the field with Liz, and she came into the lab with me. When it came time for her to do her projects, she had more species of bats because she was in the field collecting bats. She was interested in more than just the diet. She wanted to know what species of bats were present in the orchards, at what time of year, and that's more what this paper is about, all of the bats that were present in the orchards. So when she came and brought all the species of individually caught bats, and we started looking at her samples using the qPCR method, what we found very quickly was that it was the red bats that were consuming the pecan nut case bearers that the growers were really interested in. And we thought about it and realized that actually made a lot of sense. The Mexican freetail bats that were so prevalent in my research, as soon as they leave the bat houses, they go and fly very high. They're high flyers, they leave the orchards. But pecan nut case bearers, these moths, stay very close to the pecan trees. Well, red bats are tree roosting bats. They stay close to the orchards, and they roost right in the trees next to where the pecan nut case bears are. They're very small moths. They also stay close to the trees. It made perfect sense that the red bats would be the ones eating the insects. So I really enjoyed this paper because what it points out is, as scientists, we're studying the bats that are easy to catch and that are very numerous. But in terms of what bats are out there providing the services, we need to look at the entire community of bats, because it's not always the ones that are the easiest to catch and that are the most numerous that are providing the services we're looking for. It's the whole community that are providing the services. We as bat researchers know that bats are important, not just because they save us money, but because they're providing all kinds of services to the ecosystem. But we have to show the world that bats are important. So we need to be looking at all the bats, not just the ones that are the easiest to catch. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about this paper and learning a little bit more about the teacher workshop, and I hope you have a wonderful day.